Well, good morning, everybody. Larry Krueger back with you after a long Thursday night. We're back early on a Friday, turning it around, back by popular demand, former voice of the Sacramento Kings. And we are coming on after the draft. Grant Napear back with us, normally on a Monday, but this week we're doing it on a Friday. Grant, good morning. How are you?
I'm good, buddy. Good morning to you. Yeah, the NBA draft where everybody thinks they know everything about every player that's taken. The fans act like all of a sudden they're experts on the player that was taken 58th in the draft, as if they've been watching that kid play since he was in kindergarten. I always love getting the reaction out of the fans, but that's
Do we have Grant frozen there?
Yeah, he looks to be frozen. If he has internet issues, he could always call in. Be a little awkward because it'd just be your face, but
Grant, do we got you, bud? All right. Well, what should we do, Master Ryan?
I'm not necessarily dressed for a stream, but I'm thinking probably if we just, maybe we just recap the draft a little bit, and then he'll probably be back.
I would see if we can get Grant back. Maybe I'll send him a text, but see if he can redial here. But what did you think of the draft last night? I mean, it was an incredible draft show we had. And I would encourage anybody to go to the Krug Show and check out our draft show last night. We went on and on and on. It was far and away our longest show that we've ever done. 4.5 hours. And it's funny. Grant said, nobody really knows who these players are. I would say that's 99% totally accurate. Now we have him back with us.
Hey.
There you go. Hey, Grant.
I guess people don't want to hear what I have to say. I get that. I understand. It's okay.
Grant Napear back with us. Take two. How are you this morning?
I'm good. But you know what I was saying? Hey, fans, everyone thinks they're an expert when it comes to draft night, whether it's the NFL or the NBA. I get a kick out of some of the fans' reactions. I also get a kick out of draft day grades the day after a draft. And, you go back and look at draft grades 3 years later and how wrong they are. And being a person that was involved with the Sacramento Kings for as long as I have, and of course, the NBA lottery and the Sacramento Kings are synonymous, right? I mean, the Kings win the lottery every year. So I always get a kick of draft day grades and how wrong they often are a couple of years after the fact. But hey, that's why you and I have jobs, right? That's why you and I do what we do, to try to, talk to the fans and try to figure out what's true and what's not true. But I always get a real big kick out of it, Larry.
Oh, my God. One of the things I retweeted this morning, Grant, was a guy at Hater Muse put out a video. He said 4 years ago today, and it has a kid, looks like he's maybe 20, and he's got a purple T-shirt. He's got a De'Aaron Fox jersey on. He's an obvious Kings fan, and he's walking around the draft. He's walking around his TV, and Adam Silver comes on and says, the Kings take Marvin Bagley III. And this guy's like, yes, I didn't want Luka. I did not want Luka. So exactly what you're saying, Grant. It's like, we don't know. It's like, you never know. And now heck, back in the 80s and 90s, we didn't know. And those were much more defined times as far as these prospects. We knew a lot more about them. They played 2 and 3 years of college basketball. They had a track record, and still we didn't know. But now it's such a speculative draft that I think it hurts the worst teams. It helps the better teams because a pick in the 20s now has greater value than it did in the mid 80s.
Well, I mean, look at the last two MVPs in the NBA, right? Weren't they second-round picks?
Exactly.
And Antetokounmpo, and I mean, so
well, I think the Greek Freak was a mid-first.
That's right. He was a mid-first.
Jokic was a second.
Jokic, second round. Look at how many times the Spurs hit home runs at the back end of the first round, right? Tony Parker and Ginobili. And I mean, the reality is, if you're really good at evaluating talent, and again, I'm talking about really good, you're going to hit more than you're going to miss. And the good teams, the Warriors are a great example, right? They make the trade years ago. They trade their best player, Monte Ellis, to Milwaukee, and the city, the Northern California and the Bay Area was in an uproar. They couldn't believe it. Then look at what the Warriors did with the draft. Home run, home run, home run, and we're still talking about them as a dynasty now because of those draft picks. It's no accident, all right? They hit home runs year after year after year. So the teams that draft well have success. The teams that don't draft well, particularly if you're in a small market like Sacramento. But Larry, I always tell fans this. When the Kings were horrible, they turned everything around like that in the 98-99 season. They traded Mitch Richmond for Chris Webber. It was the lockout year. They signed Vlade Divac to a 6-year deal. They drafted Jason Williams, and Peja Stojakovic came over from Europe to start playing in the NBA as well. If you got to remember, Larry, when the Warriors traded Monte Ellis, they couldn't get free agents. Nobody wanted to play in Golden State. Nobody. They couldn't. They were a dead franchise for all intents and purposes. Yeah, the fan base was great. Yeah, but the point I'm trying to make is, even though the Warriors were a big market, even though the Warriors played, in Oakland, but the Bay Area, they couldn't get players to go play there. They were a terrible franchise through that period of time. And look what happened. And now everyone wants to go play for the Warriors, and everyone has wanted to play for the Warriors for a number of years. That's the way it was in the early 2000s. Even though, Larry, the Kings did not win a championship, they were able to attract pretty much whomever they wanted, free agents, the Jim Jacksons of the world, who really helped that team. Players like that, they were like, hey, I'm going to go and sign a 1-year deal with Sacramento. They have something special going on. So it can happen. It can turn around, but you have to hit on the draft, Larry.
No question about it. And we're going to talk about the Warriors and their title and a bunch of basketball topics, but I want to focus on the beginning here on the Kings, because in my opinion, when you are one of the NBA's have-nots, you only have bad decisions. You can overpay in free agency, but why would you want to overpay when teams like the Warriors are getting guys like Bjelica and Porter to sign for the minimum? So the Warriors right now, as one of the haves, can get free agents for the minimum, while the Kings have to overpay for free agents. Correct. And then let's go to last night's draft. The Warriors, I think we would both agree, would not be the Golden State Warriors without Steph Curry. Steph Curry would not work out for them. Del Curry and Steph and their agents told Larry Riley and Don Nelson, we don't want to go there. We don't want to go there. Don't draft us. And Nelly and Larry Riley called their bluff. Sure. And last night, Jaden Ivey never worked out for the Kings and basically made it clear that he didn't want to play for the Kings. Now, I don't think he was quite as strong as Steph and Del were the year that Curry came out, but the Kings knew that. And so now it's like, do we take a guy against his will, or do we take somebody else? Right. And Monty McNair said today that it was unanimous in their room that they wanted Keegan over Ivy across the board. I think of course they're going to say that. I think Ivy's going to be the rookie of the year. I think he's a generational talent. I think Ivy's terrific. We'll see. But what did you think? I mean, they went with Keegan. They showed the downtown plaza where all the Kings fans were. They cheered it. But as you said, what are they cheering? They're just cheering for they're hoping.
Right. Okay. A couple of things here. The drafting of Keegan Murray, I look at it two ways. The biggest mistake that you can make as an NBA team is draft for need when you're a bad team. Okay, I don't care if you have nothing but guards on your team. I'm exaggerating, obviously.
Sure.
And the player that you draft is a guard because you felt that that player was a cut above the rest and was the best player on the board when you drafted. I don't know what went on in the Kings room. They love Keegan Murray, but did they love him because Ivy didn't want to work out more? In other words, if I'm a GM, I don't give a damn whether the player comes and works out for me or not. What choice are they going to have? Seriously, you think, like, what was Steph Curry going to do?
Right.
I mean,
they called his bluff, and he had to
when
fold.
you say they called his bluff, what was Curry going to do?
Well, he could have. The year that Kobe came out, he made it clear he wanted to go to the Lakers, and everybody didn't call his bluff. But what if the Warriors had, and instead of taking Todd Fuller, they took Kobe? Maybe he would have demanded a trade. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe. But when you say demanded a trade, again, these players that we're talking about, their lifelong dream, and I know when I call it lifelong, some of them are 18, 19 years old, is to play in the NBA. You're going to tell me that Jaden Ivey is going to be taken 4th overall by the Sacramento Kings, and he's not going to show up? Or I've been through all of that before. So have you, Larry. That's a bunch of crap. So I don't even pay attention to that. I wouldn't pay attention to whether a player wanted to play for me or not. That would be an absolute non-issue for me if I'm a general manager. If I draft a player, they're going to come play, and that's just the way it's going to be. They don't really have a lot of other choices. They don't have any other choices. What are they going to do? Okay, that's number one.
But it is an
Number two,
awkward way to start a relationship.
Yeah, but my experience is those things get repaired rather quickly.
They work themselves out.
I'm not worried about it. You cannot run a franchise based on what a player wants when they are coming out of college. I don't really give a damn what Jaden Ivey wants. I don't really care whether he wants to play for me or not. If I feel he's the best player on the board and I draft him, I'm not worried about it. I have enough confidence in my staff, in me, that I'm going to make sure that he's going to love playing in Sacramento. So that is a non-issue for me. There are two ways I look at what the Kings did. If they drafted for need, in other words, for a fit, as opposed to best player available, they made a huge mistake. I've been through this a number of times with the Sacramento Kings, including the year they moved to Sacramento from Kansas City when they drafted Joe Klein, the first ever pick of the Sacramento Kings, who was, by the way, a very good player at Arkansas. Karl Malone was on the board, and they really liked Karl Malone, but they didn't draft Karl Malone because they had Otis Thorpe as their power forward, and Otis was a very good power forward, and it wasn't a need, all right? They didn't need a power forward. Well, let's go back to what you were talking about. The Kings drafted Marvin Bagley instead of Luka Doncic. And, oh, yeah, by the way, the Kings general manager at the time was Vlade Divac, who is a godlike figure in Serbia, who, despite what you may hear, I'm going to tell you a funny story in a minute, was very close with Luka's father. And they did not draft Luka Doncic because they didn't feel like the fit with De'Aaron Fox was ideal. They thought Marvin Bagley would be a better fit for the team. Now, I'm going to share this story real quick. I don't know if you remember the story that the reason why the Kings did not take Luka Doncic was because Vlade and his father did not get along. And I don't know if you remember that, right? I'm standing at the Amtrak station with Vlade Divac in New York City, getting ready to board a train to go to Washington. We are in the waiting area, waiting to find out what track our train's going to be leaving from. And Vlade is on the phone talking in his native tongue of Serbian, and he's laughing, and he's laughing. And I don't know what the hell he's talking about. And finally he gets off the phone and he looks at me. I go, what the hell was that all about? He goes, that was Luka's father. I go, that was Luka Doncic's father? He goes, yeah. He goes, he called me to talk to me about the reports that we don't get along and we're not friends, and that's why you didn't draft my son. So, you know, all this stuff is such just bullshit. It really is.
Right,
it's such nonsense. It really is. But back to this A and B of this whole thing, right? If Jaden Ivey was, in the Kings' mind, leading up to the draft, the best player available after Larry, we knew who the first 3 picks in the draft were going to be. We didn't think it was going to be in the order of Banchero. We thought it was going to go Smith 1, and then Holmgren 2, and Banchero 3. But most people had an agreement that those were going to be the 3 players taken in the draft. So if you're Sacramento, You knew that Ivy was going to be on the board. You knew Murray was going to be on the board. And you also knew that a lot of teams were going to be calling you because they wanted Ivy, correct? There were teams that were going to try to get that number 4 pick because they wanted Ivy. So again, I go back to this. If Ivy was the best player on their board, but not an ideal fit, and they didn't take him because of that, that's a huge mistake. But Murray's a pretty damn good player at Iowa. He's not flashy, he's not sexy, but he does everything pretty well. He's versatile. He's a good three-point shooter, has a post game, not a bad defender, is going, he's a sophomore, so he's not a one and done. I like that aspect of it. You think Ivy's going to be a star, though, right?
I do.
He's going to be a big-time star. Let's say you're right, okay? Then once again, the Kings will have made a big mistake. That's assuming that Murray is not a star. Let's say that you're wrong, which you could very well be, like we all are with draft picks. I go back to the draft of De'Aaron Fox. I'll never forget this. Remember, Boston and Philadelphia made the big deal, right? Philadelphia wanted the number 1 pick. They draft Markelle Fultz. How did that work out? The Lakers took Lonzo Ball. He was gone, right? Number 3, Jason Tatum, the best player in the draft. Oh, yeah, and by the way, Boston also got a first-round pick for that deal. Number 4, Josh Jackson, bust, right? Think about this. Josh Jackson of the Phoenix Suns was a bust at number 4, and the Kings take De'Aaron Fox at 5, who's a good player, but he's not a max player, and the Kings have paid him that way. So, we analyzed the draft a couple of years later, and we're like, because, Larry, if you remember, everyone's thinking, oh, boy, this draft's amazing. Oh, what a big draft this is going to be. Well, look at some of the players taken in the top 5. Number 2, Ball. Number 1, Fultz. Number 4, Jackson. I mean, not that Lonzo Ball's not going to be a good player, but the point is the Lakers traded him. So these drafts,
it's
they're not an exact science. They're not an exact science, right? But if the Kings Larry, if the Kings had Ivy as the most talented, best player on the board at 4, and I don't know if they did, and they did not take him because it wasn't the ideal fit, that's a big mistake. And I don't know the answer to that question.
The Kings' history in Sacramento, if you really think about it, is stunning. It's stunning. Why? Because they showed up in the late 80s and they were instantly kind of, even though they were embraced fully by Sacramento, the city loved them immediately, but they were one of the have-nots. And then suddenly they became one of the haves. And now here they are again, and they're one of the have-nots. Yep. It's almost like if Golden State went back to being one of the have-nots. The Warriors were a have-not team most of my life. Most of my life, they were a team that didn't, the stars rested when they came to Golden State so they could play Peyton in Seattle, and they could play whoever, Drexler in Portland, and they could play hard on the West Coast on those games, and then they would sit their stars or play them light minutes in Oakland because the Warriors were one of the have-nots. And then the Warriors draft Steph Curry, draft Klay Thompson, draft Draymond Green, and turn themselves from one of the have-nots into one of the haves. And now here they are. They're one of the haves. But if it followed Sacramento's formula, the Warriors would become what they used to be, which is totally irrelevant. And at this point, for most Warrior fans, that's hard to even envision. But I want to ask you, because you lived it and you were there before it happened, as it happened, and after it happened. What was the culture-changing moment for Sacramento? And what will it take for them to change their culture again so they become one of the haves, so they become a choice destination? And maybe that's impossible. Maybe you're going to tell me that they were never necessarily a choice destination, but I look at the Kings as a very fun outfit there in the late 90s, early 2000s, and a team that I wanted to watch. Sure. I think there were players that probably wanted to play there. What was the move, if there was one, that changed the culture? Was it the sale of the team? Was it a move?
No, it was Vlade Divac. Vlade Divac changed the culture of the Sacramento Kings. He came into the locker room and everything changed overnight. Literally changed overnight.
Really?
No question.
And on the strength of his personality?
Personality, leadership. Vlade Divac is the best locker room player I've ever seen. Also a good player on the court, by the way. Without Vlade Divac, the Kings would not have had the success that they had. Vlade was clearly the biggest reason that the Sacramento Kings were able to go from the have-nots to the haves overnight.
And what did they pay to get him, Grant? What was that deal?
Six-year deal, $60 million.
Oh, it was a free agent deal.
Yeah,
he came with this. So when they signed Vlade as a free agent, and this is a Petrie move, overnight, the culture changed.
Overnight.
Did you know it at the time, or do you know it now only looking back?
No, I knew it at the time. You knew it. You got to remember, the season did not begin that year until February 5th. It was a 50-game season, and I knew it probably by the end of February, like, wow. And everyone started talking about the Kings, but everything changed with Vlade Divac. He changed the culture of that franchise. It was unbelievable. It was it was incredible. It was absolutely incredible. And, you can talk to, whether it's in Europe, whether it's the era that Vlade played, whether it was even, if you talk to Magic Johnson or if you talk to anyone, you won't hear anyone ever say a bad word about Vlade Divac. You just won't. I mean, you will not hear, unless you're talking about drafting Marvin Bagley over Luka, but I'm talking as a basketball player and really as a human being. You won't hear anyone say anything bad about Vlade as a person. He's one of the great human beings that I've ever been associated with. He was the glue to that team. As a matter of fact, the year that the Kings had the best record, the previous year, Chris Webber had torn his knee in the Dallas series in round 2 and had to have microfracture surgery. People were like, boy, the Kings are going to be terrible. The Kings that year had the best record in the NBA on March 2nd when Chris Webber came back. Now think about that. Vlade Divac was playing the best basketball of his career. Brad Miller was playing great, and they still had the same components, but they didn't have Chris. They had the best record in the NBA when Chris came back on March 2nd. And after that, when Chris came back, because he did not want to come off the bench and Rick Adelman would not put him on the bench, what he should have done, the Kings were a 500 team the rest of the regular season and lost in round 2 to Minnesota in game 7 at Minnesota. And the story, I'll never forget this. We are in line getting ready to get on the airplane at the little aviation hangar at the Minneapolis airport. And I'm standing in the back, and Vlade and Peja are next to me. And Vlade had gone to get a cup of coffee at the General, right there. And Vlade's like, we're done. I'm like, what? He goes, it's over. I'm like, what do you mean it's over? He goes, we're done. It's over. Our run ended. The door just closed. I was like, what the hell are you talking about? He goes, trust me, it's done. We're over. And he was right. The run ended, but I'll never forget that conversation with Vlade Divac when the Kings lost to game 7 to Minnesota. And he said, that's it. And Vlade, by the way, that was his last game ever in Sacramento. He went and signed a deal with the Lakers, then had a bad back injury and never really played. But he was 100% right. That was Vlade. And I didn't ask him at the time, but he must have known then that he wasn't coming back to Sacramento, and that's why I said it was over. And when Vlade left the locker room, now in all fairness, the Kings did make the playoffs 2 following years, but they lost in the first round each time. But that was just, I'll never forget that moment. So one person in the locker room can change the culture, because I saw it happen in Sacramento. And as far as being a destination, the Kings were a destination during that era. Players were telling their agents, get me to Sacramento. They were signing very good players on 1-year veteran deals because players thought the Kings were going to win a title and they wanted to be a part of it. Oh, what else did they want to be a part of? Ball movement. The fact that everyone got a chance to shoot and have the ball in their hands. That was very attractive back then. The Kings were on the cover of Sports Illustrated with their starting 5, and the caption was, basketball the way it ought to be played. Okay, so that was and what's so crazy is the Kings didn't win a championship. They lost in the Western Conference Finals in 2002 to the Lakers in overtime in Game 7. So we talk about that era of how good the Kings were, but they couldn't beat the Lakers. The Lakers were their nemesis. They were their kryptonite. They couldn't get by the Lakers. But back to fast forwarding to where we are now in 2022. I saw it in Sacramento. You, working in the Bay Area, saw the Warriors, I don't want to say overnight. It wasn't overnight. But you could see under Mark Jackson, the team getting better and better. And then when Kerr came in, the players, Curry, and they were a little bit more seasoned and ready to make that next jump. But you could see it. right? Whereas in Sacramento, it happened like that. Boom. They went from the worst team. Fans had finally stopped going to the games. And in that 50-game season, the Kings made the playoffs. They won 27 games that year. They were 27-23, and they lost to the Utah Jazz in 5 games. And the 5th and final game was in Salt Lake City, and the Kings lost in overtime. And then that was really the start of their really nice run that they had. But it did happen overnight. And Larry, hard to believe, Sacramento, not only was Sacramento a destination, the Kings led the league in attendance, Larry. Think about this. On the road in the NBA. Think about that.
They were the hottest ticket, no doubt.
Right?
Absolutely. They were like the Warriors now, or the Hawks with Spud Webb and Dominique. I mean, they were the ticket. They were this is like pre-dynamic pricing, but if you could have dynamic priced them, you would have, right? You would have paid more to go to the Kings games. Everybody wanted to see that show. I thought they played a very they played an entertaining brand of ball. They shared the ball. There was a lot of skill, a lot of shooting. But wow, so it wasn't Vlade's game as much as Vlade's personality, huh?
It was both. I mean, Vlade was
he shared the ball.
He was a phenomenal basketball player with a high basketball IQ, and he was a tremendous passer. But what Vlade did for that team in the locker room, on the bus, on the plane, was just you had to be there to believe it. He was always keeping the team loose, always playing jokes on people, always keeping things light. It was the players on the Kings during that era loved coming to work. You know, a lot of players don't like practice. The players on the Kings, not only they got there early, they hung out afterwards because they were always laughing and joking. I mean, it was like the place to be. I mean, it really was, and it was a culture that I've never seen since. I've never seen anything quite like what the Kings had during that era. It was the closest knit locker room. It was the best chemistry that I had ever been around in my 32 years of covering the NBA. There was nothing that I had ever seen like it before.
So that being said, would you say then the key to changing the culture is adding somebody with leadership ability, or adding somebody with who's incredibly positive, or is it the addition of a passing big man that kind of gets everybody involved? I mean, ultimately, is what would get Sacramento to change that culture again? Is it an individual player?
Your leader has to be a good player, first of all. And Vlade was a good player. He really was. He was a very good player. And your leader has to be someone that every single person in that room respects. Every single player respected Vlade Divac. You will not run across a player that played with Vlade Divac that did not respect him. And I will tell you, when we used to go on the road, and even when Vlade was the general manager, the number of Del Curry and Vlade played together in Charlotte and are incredibly tight. And I've talked to Del about this. Vlade had that same impact in that locker room in Charlotte. And oh, by the way, Vlade watched Steph and Seth grow up together as kids in that locker room when Vlade was there. And it's amazing to talk about what that was like. To what was Steph Curry like as a little kid. And so the stories are amazing. But no matter where you go, and in Europe, I saw it. I was in Serbia for a week, okay, in 2007. I was in Belgrade. And I'll never forget this. It was Vlade's retirement. In Serbia, there's a ritual that when you retire, you have to make one more basket. So we went to Serbia, and Vlade had a huge event. A lot of people went over there. Vlade was godlike in Serbia. It was the most amazing thing. We took the presidential train to Vlade's hometown, which was about a 4 to 5 hour trip from Belgrade. And the people in Serbia found out that the train was going to be coming with Vlade Divac on it. And, there was probably 50 of us on the train, and we were all different cars. All right. You can go where you wanted. Vlade was in one car. I'll never forget this story. Vlade was in the one car of the train with all of the guys that he played basketball with growing up in former Yugoslavia. And I was just walking out and checking out the train, and I walked in and I almost passed out because every single person there was smoking cigarettes. The entire car was like nothing but a blue film of smoke in there. All right, so I remember that. But Larry, I'll never forget this as long as I live. Throughout the entire trip, okay, there were people on their rooftops. They were in their fields. They had stopped working. They were waiting to see the train that Vlade Divac was on come through their town. Okay, it was unfreaking believable. And the train made an unscheduled stop at a station some halfway between Belgrade and Vlade's hometown, because there were so many people that showed up on the platform, and the train stopped, and Vlade went out and said hello to everybody. And you would have thought the Pope had just gotten off the train. Seriously, it was unbelievable. Godlike figure in that part of the world. But you just won't find, first of all, you don't find a lot of leaders like Vlade Divac, because you have to be good. You also have to have everyone respect you. I mean, they're
Sure.
It was unbelievable. It was absolutely the most amazing thing I've ever seen. So you asked me, what does it take for the Kings? The first thing it's going to take, Larry, is the Kings are stuck around 30 wins every year. Okay, they're just stuck. And
NBA middle ground. NBA middle ground, really. I mean,
NBA middle ground.
Maybe not even quite middle ground, but they're in that kind of bubble where they can't get any higher than that.
They can't. They absolutely cannot. And think about all the bad draft picks just in the last 10 years, right?
Sure. Jimmer over Clay.
Thomas Robinson over Damian Lillard. I mean, bust, right?
Bagley over Luka.
Right. Okay. So, I mean, we can go on and on. I mean, their first round draft picks have been just disastrous for the most part. Okay. And it's been different GMs selecting these players. Now, in all fairness to the current GM, Monte McNair, his last two draft picks have been pretty good. Tyrese Halliburton, who was part of the deal to get Sabonis, who's a two-time All-Star, and Davion Mitchell last year, who looks like he's going to be a damn good player.
Yeah,
but
love him.
But Larry, if you are right, and others are right about Ivy, and he comes in with a label on him already, which can be very difficult for a young player to live up to that label. If you are right, and this guy becomes a big-time star, because I can't see Murray becoming a big-time star just because of the way he plays. I can see him being a very good player.
He might be a good fit.
But Larry, what wins in the NBA? Good fits or stars?
Yeah,
right?
Stars.
But I'm not saying the Kings took the wrong player. All I'm saying is if you're right, then this will once again set the franchise back for years, and the fan base is going to, wait a minute. We could have had Luka, and we could have had Ivy, and we drafted Marvin Bagley, and we drafted Murray. Now, Bagley, I don't think Murray's going to be as bad as Bagley was. I can't imagine that, but you just never know. I mean, Larry, how many times did the Warriors have a number one pick or high draft picks, and we saw players come in and, like, I'll never forget the Thomas Robinson pick. I went to Summer League, and I got there on day 2 of Summer League, and Bobby Jackson was coaching the Summer League team. And I go, well, how's Thomas Robinson, man? And Bobby goes, he can't play. I'm like, what do you mean? Is he hurt? He goes, no, he can't play. I go, what do you mean he can't play? What, he didn't sign his contract? He's not. What do you mean he can't play?
Right.
He goes, bro.
He's no good.
Bro, he can't effing play. Can't play? You haven't had a game yet. What do you mean he can't play? I'm like, What do you mean he can't play? And Bobby's like, it's a mistake, man. The guy can't play. And you know what? Bobby was right. He was with the guy for 2 days and knew that he couldn't play. And you know what? He's one of the biggest busts that the Kings have ever drafted at Thomas Robinson.
Wow.
Yeah. I'll never forget that as long as I live. Bobby,
big rhythm force is if Vlade grabs that rebound, the Kings franchise has a different history.
Yeah, or if Robert Horry should have been.
Is that too dramatic?
Or if Robert Horry if Robert Horry should have been where he should have been. I mean, with basically less than a second left, what's the power forward doing outstanding at the 3-point line instead of trying to go in for a rebound on a drive by Kobe Bryant? So, you know, that's part of it as well. But yeah, I mean, that's the Robert Horry shot in Game 4. If that shot doesn't go in, and not only that, there was a 3-pointer at the buzzer at halftime by Walker that was clearly after the buzzer sounded, but there was no replay back then, and the basket counted. So everything went against Sacramento in that series. But after that disastrous Game 6 officiating, the Robert Horry Game 4 shot, Game 7 you worked for all year to be on your home court, and the Kings missed 14 free throws to the Lakers in Game 7 on their home floor. You can't blame that on the refs.
No, you can't. We've got this one. Kyrie to LA says, "Stop living in the past." Now, I'm asking Grant all these questions. We're going down memory lane just because to me it is so stunning watching the Kings go from the have-nots to the haves, now back to the have-nots. Yep. The Warriors were a have-not forever; they're a have now. And if you said to Warrior fans, you know what, someday the Warriors are going back to their old have-not status, they'd be like, "Hell no, they aren't. There's no chance in hell they're going back." And who knows? We'll see. We're all hoping here that doesn't happen. Give me a couple thoughts on the draft, though. Chet Holmgren? What do you see with Chet Holmgren? Because I'll say this. I mean, I can see the talent. I can see I watched him a ton at Gonzaga. I've heard the interviews. He's very confident. He's got a ton of game. He's got a ton of skill. But he's also got a body that just looks like it's going to last like 3 weeks, and then he's going to break something. Pounds. Yeah, I mean, there's only one Kevin Durant. You know what I mean? You start looking for. I mean, we saw this in the '80s after Barkley got drafted. Every guy who was like 6'7" or under and kind of thick, he's Barkley. He's Barkley. Byron Houston's Barkley. Everybody's Barkley. Yeah. In reality, nobody was Barkley. That's correct. And I think the same thing with KD. KD, nobody's really KD. I just don't like that pick from the standpoint of I can see the skill, but I just think that, the number one ability, as Bob Myers used to say, is availability. And I just question this kid's ability to stay on the floor, to be durable, to play the schedule, to run up and down. I just don't think he can do it.
Well, he's not going to be able to do it for a while. I can tell you that. I said this, the Kings, I said there was no way they were going to take Chet Holmgren if he were available at number 4, because Monty McNair doesn't have that much time left on his longevity as general manager with the Kings, so it wouldn't make any sense. The guy's 7 feet 195. So to me, I don't see him really having an impact on a team until at least year 3. It's going to take that long. Then, Larry, the other aspect is, when you take a player and all of a sudden you put all of this extra weight on him, which they're going to do, make no mistake about it, you don't know how the bone structure, the tendons, the ligaments, all of those things, that makes me nervous.
The feet, a guy that's 7 feet tall. Stress fractures, all that kind of stuff.
It makes me nervous. It makes me nervous. Now, we also have to be realistic about this, Larry. You and I can be having a conversation 5 years from now, and we can say, hey, Graham, remember that time we were talking about the 2022 draft, and we were talking about Chet Holmgren? And we could look back and go, he is, without question, the best player in the draft. We could be saying that in 5 years. I mean, that's not out of the realm of possibility. His skill set is such that 5 years from now, we could look back and go, oh, yeah, best player in the draft, not even a conversation. That's very realistic. That could happen. But it wasn't going to happen in Sacramento. They can't wait that long for a player, in my opinion.
I can ask you about who the Warriors drafted, but I mean, I personally don't know a lot about them. Ryan Rollins played at Toledo. The other kid played for Milwaukee. Wisconsin, Milwaukee. It was, I know the first pick was, son of a coach, played for his dad, didn't have a very good year, but was a highly rated player coming out of high school. Rollins looks like a pretty athletic point guard. There's not a lot to say there because I don't think either of us know that much about him, and neither of us like to sit here and pretend. But you have a thought on Patrick Baldwin Jr. or Ryan Rollins or what Golden State did?
As far as Baldwin, I mean, again, it's typical Warriors team. The guy's a really good shooter, but he had an ankle problem and was very limited in his only year at Milwaukee. So I don't really know much more other than what I read. What I do know is if I'm a rookie, I don't want to be drafted by the Warriors because I don't know if I'm ever going to make the team and even be anywhere near the floor. I mean, that's probably the one team. In one sense, I'm like, wow, I'm going to a great team and I can win a championship, assuming that he makes the team. Again, if I'm a player, who's coming out of college after 1 year and the Warriors draft me, I'm like, oh my gosh, how am I ever going to make that team? How am I going to be on the floor? So I don't know a lot about either of those players. I really don't. As far as Baldwin, all I talk, the guy can shoot. And when you're on the Warriors, you better know how to shoot because if you can't shoot, you're going to have a tough time playing.
No question. What do you make of the Kyrie Irving talk? He liked the
I wouldn't want
Nets.
him.
Yeah, I mean, he's a great player. There's no question. He's a great talent. But
Great.
I mean, what's the commitment? What's the maturity level? How much does he want to be there? Is he going to blow up your franchise?
Yeah.
The Lakers want him, the Clippers, the Knicks, the Heat, the Mavericks, the Sixers. Everybody wants him, but I don't know. I mean, he's an incredible talent. What's the issue with Irving in your mind?
The issue with Irving is his unpredictability off the court. That's my biggest issue, and I'm not even talking about the vaccine. The vaccine. I'm not talking about him being unvaccinated. If you go back to the year 2 seasons ago, not this past season, the season did not start until Christmas time, right? In January, the guy takes a leave of absence. Okay, just takes a leave of absence. Comes back and says he needed a break. Need a break. Took 2 more leaves of absence that year. He's unreliable. Then all of a sudden he blows off the media and comes out and says that I don't really need to talk to the media. Yes, you do. It's part of your contract. He's just flippant. You don't know what's going to be coming out of his mouth next, but actions speak louder than words. And I've talked about this with a lot of players. What a player wants more than anything, they want to know that the guy next to them is dependable, that they can count on him.
Committed, totally committed, as committed as they are.
That's correct. And this guy, his actions tell me that he is not committed, that he's about Kyrie Irving. I don't want a player who's about himself. And I think any general manager that wants Kyrie Irving and then is going to give him an extension is delusional. I think it's as delusional as what Daryl Morey's infatuation with James Harden is, making that deal in Philadelphia and what he had to give up to get Harden. I think that's a GM that is delusional. I don't think he's dealing with reality. A general manager to sign Kyrie Irving, in my opinion, based on his last several years of his actions, is making a huge mistake. I wouldn't want Kyrie Irving anywhere near my team, and I say that knowing full well he is one of the most talented players on the planet. We don't even have to debate that. This guy is super talented. He is a great talent, not a good talent. He is a great talent, but I wouldn't want him on my team because of the unpredictability.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. He is an awesome talent, but you have to have the commitment. If you have no commitment, you have nothing. If you have no trust, locker stall to locker stall on a team that's 15 deep instead of, you have nothing. I mean, so to me, that one is interesting to see where it goes. Kenny Atkinson was going to Charlotte and then reverse course suddenly and decided to stay with the Warriors. Give me your read on that, because my read is that I think Kerr is a guy who likes coaching, but I don't see a basketball lifer. I don't see PJ Carlissimo. I don't see Don Nelson. I don't see one of these guys that's going to do this until the bitter end. I see a guy who wants to, he's got 9 rings, maybe 10's the number. Maybe he wants to catch Phil. I think Phil's got 11. I don't know, but I got to think that Kenny Atkinson must have been promised that gig by Joe Lacob, or at least given some assurances from Kerr that, hey, you know what? Don't go anywhere. If your family likes it here, I'm only going to do this for a year or two more, and then you can be the guy. What's your read on Atkinson taking, because I mean, Charlotte's, people say, well, why would he want to go to Charlotte? They have LaMelo. They have the makings of a beginning there. This might be the glory age of Charlotte Hornet basketball going forward. Who knows? But I don't think that there's a lot worse teams off than Charlotte. I was surprised that he didn't about face there. Were you?
I was shocked. I was shocked. I really was. That's very unusual for a coach to do that. I know that a lot of people think a lot of Kenny Atkinson, but I'm with you. There has to be kind of a wink deal behind the scenes, in my opinion, for him to give up a head coaching job. We can say all you want about, well, he would get another job. He would get another job. There are a lot of coaches that have said that never got that next job. There are only 30 of them. Okay. And there's also a trend now of young, inexperienced coaches, former players, getting deals. All right. And so if you're Kenny Atkinson, that has to be running through your mind as well. I just don't know why you would give up a head coaching position to go back to be an assistant unless you kind of have a wink deal. I just, it doesn't make sense to me.
Mike Brown is the new head coach in Sacramento. There's a lot of talk that the Kings are going to make a big run at Kevon Looney in free agency. Should they? And what do you think? I mean, do you like Looney in Sacramento? Do you think the Warriors ought to make a big play to retain him? He's been a key cog for them. They've done nothing but win, but they also have James Wiseman sitting right there, and they're spending a boatload of cash on their roster. I gotta think there's some limits. Well, I know there's limits to what teams can offer Looney, as far as there aren't a lot of teams with cap room, so it may work out in the Warriors' favor. But what do you think of Looney in Sacramento if they decide to make a big play there?
You know, Jerry Reynolds always used to tell me this: you don't become a good team by losing good players. You become a good team by having good players. And the Kings just don't have enough good players to be a playoff team. That's the reality of the situation. So if you can get Kevon Looney, get him. You know why? Because I think he's a good player. Now, there are those that are going to say, well, he's really good for the Warriors because of the players that play around him. You know, it's the saying is you're as good as the players that you play with.
Sure.
I've always felt that to be about Harrison Barnes. I'm a big Harrison Barnes fan. I love the guy. I think he's the most he's such a professional. He's got such a high basketball IQ. But I also think that Sacramento's a bad fit for him. I think his talents are wasted in Sacramento. I think if you put Harrison Barnes on a good team, he's going to be a really good player for them. As far as Looney goes, though, there's really nothing about him, Larry, I don't like. I think he'd be a real good fit in Sacramento. Mike Brown feels that way. I would think most general managers would feel that way. I don't know what it would cost to get him, but if you're Sacramento, you have to accumulate good players. You're not going to become a better team without good players, and they don't have a lot of good players. So I think Kevon Looney's a good player.
And if Vlade was a big key to the turnaround, and you're talking about his personality and his character, then maybe a guy like Looney would help that turnaround as well, because I think he also is a good guy with tremendous character. It started with Brian Windhorst, but the drumbeat got louder as soon as the Warriors knocked off the Celtics. That Joe Lacob literally bought a title with Golden State simply because the Warriors had the highest payroll in the league. Lacob was asked about it by Anthony Slater of The Athletic, and he pushed back. I mean, he really pushed back. He said, that's a joke. He says, I think it's ridiculous. All of our players are guys that we drafted or minimum signings except for one, the Wiggins trade. One trade, no free agent beyond the minimum. How can you say we bought the title? It's crazy. The Warriors did have the highest payroll this year at $184 million. But most of that was spent on retaining, Curry, Thompson, and Green, who they drafted. Heck, they took Green in the second round, for crying out loud. Did they buy their title in any way?
So, no, it bothers me because I'm a big Brian Windhorst fan. I did not appreciate that. I think it's a slap in the face to the Warrior fans and that organization.
It's too dismissive.
Absolutely. Here's the other aspect. Call it whatever you want. When the Warriors left Oracle, to move into that beautiful Chase Center, with it came a price tag that, let's be honest, the quote-unquote average fan couldn't go to a game anymore, okay?
Right. It's very expensive.
All right. So what do I want as a fan? I went through this as a Yankee fan. Do I want my owner to just pocket the money and be frugal and have a good team but not really go for it? Or do I want an owner that's like going to do everything in his power to win a championship and keep the best players? So if I'm a Warriors fan, I'm paying a premium now to go to the games. Like, I'm paying a big time premium. My owner better damn well be putting the money that I'm paying him back into the product that I'm paying my ass for to go watch every game. So I think what Joe Lacob has done is phenomenal. All right. He has a gold mine in downtown San Francisco in the Chase Center. The Warriors are an incredibly hot property, and he's keeping his best players there. But you just talked about all the draft picks, the Andrew Wiggins deal, not the free agents. How is that buying your team? If anything, more teams should follow the pattern of Joe Lacob if they have the resources to do it. Resources is a key word here. The Warriors have the resources because of their beautiful brand new building, which cost a fortune to go to a game. So I give Joe Lacob all the credit in the world. From afar, I admire the hell out of what he's done. He's a hell of an owner. All right. Why?
Might be the best owner in Bay Area sports. He might be the best owner in Bay Area sports right now.
Yes. Yes. Well, and that's saying
maybe
something.
as great as Eddie D.
That's saying something.
It really is. What do you think if it came down to if they said to you Bob Myers calls your cell, says Grant got I caught you. We're going to re-sign Looney or Peyton, but not both, and I want your input. Wow. You say,
woo.
That's a tough one, isn't it?
That's really tough. I'm probably going to go Peyton because of the position that he plays.
I am too.
And the defense. I'm probably going to go Peyton. That would be hard though, Larry. I'd have to think about that. That's a great question. And then I would say, hey, Bob, do you see any openings in the broadcasting department anytime soon?
Exactly.
But no, I would probably say I'd keep Peyton. And I know what a big fan you are of Peyton, but I also know that you think Looney's really important to the success of the Warriors too. But if you told me I could only take one, I'm probably taking Peyton.
Do you think they're both free agents? Do you see a bigger offer coming from somewhere in the league for Peyton or for Looney based on the championship run here?
I think Peyton. I think his upside, really? Larry, is really good. Don't you? I love his upside.
I mean, I think people should respect him. I don't know. This guy's been on 9 teams, including 5 in the G League. It's hard to say, but how do you not see him as a difference maker? All right, let's talk about Steph and this Warrior team. How many more titles does this group have? I guess the question might be more like, how enamored are you with the new core of Wiseman, Moody, and Kuminga being the kind of the focus as they go forward? Or how many more rings do you think Steph, Clay, and Draymond have together? Because I mean, it's a deep league and there's a lot of talent, but I don't know if I see a true number one contender out there that's really like, watch out for these guys.
The difference in the series between the Celtics and the Warriors was, and we talked about this before the series began, the Warriors have Steph Curry and the Celtics don't. End of story. Okay, to me, if Steph Curry is healthy next year when the playoffs begin, the Warriors are still the team to beat without even knowing what other moves the teams around them are going to make. What would it be? And you just talked about the new blood of the Warriors as well to go with their vets. Why would I not pick the Warriors right now based on what we know, based on the draft? Free agency doesn't start until next week. Based on what we know right now, who in the West would you pick better than Golden State? I'm sorry.
The team that I've got an eye on is Minnesota because Karl Anthony Towns and Anthony Edwards are stars. Yeah. And if they could add, then they get some nice role players on that team as well. If they could add, the right combination of 2 or 3 guys, I think Minnesota is the team that nobody talks about that's coming because I think Edwards is a superstar.
Are they ready to go from the 7th spot in the West to winning a championship?
Probably not. Probably not.
I think the growth to me, I think we might be 2 years down the road from that. I still think the Warriors with their experience, and again, Curry is such a magical player. If he's right and he's healthy with what else they have around him, here's a couple of things that we look for starting July 1st. I think keeping your eye on Phoenix and the DeAndre Ayton situation. Let me ask you, do you think when training camp opens next year, end of September, beginning of October, you think Ayton is on the Phoenix Suns?
I think there's some motivation to move him. I think they'll move him. I do.
Do you become better? How do you get better?
I don't know. I don't know if I don't know what kind of offers they're going to be because it's a weird time in history to be moving a franchise center.
Yep.
It's like hard to evaluate exactly what your return would be. But it just seems like there's something wrong with the chemistry there.
Yes.
They underachieved at the end of the year. Could it have been COVID? Maybe, but something tells me that there's a broken relationship there beneath the surface, and I'm not sure how you repair it. But I could see them moving on from Ayton and becoming less center focused. I don't know if it makes sense to invest the monster dollars in a DeAndre Ayton when it's a wing league. I don't know. I mean,
Larry, they won 64 games with DeAndre Ayton as the starting center. I'm not saying that's why they won. I'm not saying that's why they won 64 games. But there's a saying: if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I know the Suns lost. I get the fact that the Suns lost in the playoffs. I get that. But do you look at that team and go, "Gee, we got to make major changes"? I don't.
No.
But what about Chris Paul?
But they no-showed that last series.
They did. Well, in Game 7, they no-showed.
Yeah.
Dallas.
It was ugly.
No, but what I'm saying, Game 7, there was a no-show, and they were no-shows on the road in those games, and that's why we thought Phoenix was going to win Game 7, and Dallas went in there and blew their doors off, right? Now, the other aspect with Phoenix is Chris Paul. At what level, for how much longer can Chris Paul go? That would be, to me, a big concern, too, if I'm the Phoenix Suns.
What do you think he's got left? I'm saying like maybe 2 years.
Maybe, and the guy still gets hurt a lot. And, I hate to keep on piling on Chris Paul but again, I look at Game 7. I need Chris Paul to be the guy, and how many times have Chris Paul not been the guy, as the best player on his team when the team needs him the most? So, that's always going to haunt Chris Paul. That's always going to be part of his legacy, as great as of a player he is, and he's an amazing talent. But those big game performances, boy, oh boy, they don't look good on his resume. They really don't.
If you said the number one contender for Golden State going into next year, based on, now the draft is kind of the Super Bowl of the offseason. Obviously, the free agency period is coming up. Golden State is probably going to sign a few veterans, but who's the number one contender in your mind right now?
I think Memphis is. I think Memphis took
in the entire league or just the West?
In the West. I haven't really, the East to me is, as long as Adetokounmpo is healthy, he's that special. And by the way, he's just now entering his prime. And without Chris Middleton, I think Milwaukee would have beat Boston had Chris Middleton been healthy.
Yeah, right? I agree.
So let's just say that Chris Middleton is going to be back and healthy. Let's just say that for our conversation. I think Milwaukee is the most talented and best team in the East. We have the unpredictability in Brooklyn. We don't know what the hell is going to happen there. I'm not on board with anything in Philadelphia because of James Harden. And then Miami's going to be good because Miami's always good and they're well coached and they're a well-run organization. And so Miami's still going to be there. But to me, Milwaukee, with a healthy Chris Middleton and assuming the Greek Freak is healthy, I think they're the best team in the East. I really do. But I think in the West, Memphis is going to be Golden State's biggest challenge.
A couple more minutes before we say goodbye. We're running up here on an hour. We don't want to go too much longer, but I want to get your thoughts because last time we talked, the finals was going on. Golden State finished them out, winning games 4, 5, and 6. I mean, I'd like to say I didn't see it coming, but I saw this one coming. And I think Udoka is a terrific young coach, but I think he showed his relative lack of experience in this series. He couldn't get his team going. He got more involved with the officials as the series went on. He let his players get more involved with the officials. And I thought that first possession of Game 6 showed that he knew what the Celtics' advantage really was, which was Tatum, Horford, and Williams catching the ball in the lane against smaller defenders. Golden State had no way to defend it. The first play went into Horford. He got a three-point play out of it. I think it wasn't a three-point play. He got fouled. He went to the line. I think he made 2. But then they went away from that. And it's like that was their advantage. They should have fed the post until Golden State either was in severe foul trouble or Golden State stopped it. And instead, how many times have you seen a team dominate in the post and they can't, the other team, in this case the Warriors, could not stop it, and yet it didn't cost them the series because the Celtics just kind of went away from it. I thought Udoka, I thought there was a miscalculation there. I thought they should have They should have changed. People would say, well, that's not how they got there. Who cares? It's the finals. You play matchups. Yeah. Play differently. Play whatever way you need to play to win that game, that series. I think they got too tied to this is how we got here, as opposed to how do we win now that we're here.
I think analytics has a lot to do with that, and I think it's really hurt the NBA game because teams, even when they have an advantage down low, still try to shoot the three ball. That's number one. Number two, you and I both thought the Warriors would win. You picked them in 6. I picked them in 7. I said in order for the Celtics to win the series, they would have to win 2 games on the road. They won 1 game on the road. You and I both picked Golden State because we thought their roster was the better roster from top to bottom. And I picked Golden State mainly because they had Steph Curry and Boston did not have Steph Curry. You know, you bring up a fabulous point, and you brought this up, I want to say either 2 shows ago or the last time we did a show about what adjustments would Ime Udoka make and what you thought they had to do. I just think that part of the game, analytics has ruined. I really mean that, ruined. Teams just will not live in the post, even if they have a significant advantage, because of the analytics of what the 3 ball does to the game. And I really believe, and let's also talk about this real quickly. These past NBA playoffs were horrible. They were terrible. The finals were terrible. Let's just call it the way it is.
Terrible in that there weren't any really close games.
Larry, NBA finals, there wasn't one game.
They were lowly rated, but that's a whole nother discussion.
Larry, there were no big possessions in the NBA finals for all intents and purposes. Big possessions are, a minute left, the game tied down 2. We didn't have any of that. The previous rounds, there were a lot of bad basketball, Larry. The Miami-Boston series in the Eastern Conference Finals was unwatchable. It was terrible. There were no close games. There were too many blowouts, and I believe it's the way the game is played. And the TV ratings in the NBA Finals were not good either, by the way. Larry, the NBA needs to examine their game, and they need to make some changes. The 3 ball is hurting the game. And these past finals and past playoffs are Exhibit A. It was not a good postseason for the NBA. It just wasn't. And I believe analytics is part of what you're talking about, Larry. And again, you talk about, well, gee, that's not what got the Celtics there. You're 100% correct. And because it wasn't what got them there, it's the unfamiliarity. They're not confident with that part of their game, doing it over and over again. They had an obvious mismatch. You pointed it out. If you point it out, why can't Ime Udoka and the Celtics see that? That was their obvious advantage, and they went away from that in an elimination game. How do you explain that? How do you explain that?
It's hard to. Personally, I hear what you're saying about the playoffs. I was entertained by it, but heck, my team won the title. So yeah. I mean, that's a big part of it. You hit on one thing. I wasn't going in this direction, but I feel like I have to now that you brought this up. The ratings were crap. The ratings were terrible, and the NBA playoff ratings have been bad. Is it more because of the analytics and the sameness of the product, or is the ratings a reflection of the public pushing back on the political messaging and ESPN's political messaging and the force feeding of a political message within a sports context? Is that, you think, what's the number one reason for the ratings being down? Because I think the Celtics are fun to watch. I think the Warriors are fun to watch. I think there's a lot of great basketball players out there. But the ratings are undeniably down. Is it tied to the continued kind of morphing of the audience from, small number of channels to lots of channels? Or is it about politics? Is it about messaging? Or is it about analytics and the style of play? What's the number one reason for the regression of the ratings? Because it's clear at this point.
Number one reason. I think it's all of the above. I will tell you this. I receive almost on a daily basis messages on my social media accounts and from people when I'm out and about that tell me they have stopped watching the NBA and they're tired of the political messaging by the league. All right. Now I'm telling you that I've had many, 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 many people tell me that. I also will tell you, I've had a lot of people tell me they don't enjoy watching a game as much as they used to. People in my generation because the game really is all about 3-point shooting, and it's taken away some of the fun. You're a
I've
little
heard players
biased.
say that. I mean, heck, I did the show with Tolbert. Tolbert was saying for months how the everybody plays the same style, and it's just too many threes, and it's just
it's terrible.
He thinks it has a lot to do with the stylistic difference or changes.
What does that mean?
Well, the fact that there's so many three balls and that you don't have there's a lot of the same kinds of actions, and that becomes kind of a static thing. And I think that, maybe I'm not voicing it exactly the way Tommy did, but that was his point.
I think when you have LeBron James, who, in my opinion, is the second greatest player that I've ever watched, and I was blessed to announce his first ever NBA game, and I love watching him play. I think he's pushed a lot of people away from the sport with his hypocrisy on social media, which is numerous, including what happened in the parking lot of his high school 2 weeks ago, where he remained silent. And it's just these acts of hypocrisy, I think, turn people off. Not everyone. I also believe, in all fairness, LeBron's probably brought a good number of people into the sport.
Sure.
With how he plays the game. So I'm trying to be fair here, but I will tell you, I believe that's part of the problem. I really believe that. But I think Tom Tolbert is exactly right. I've been saying this for years. I've shared with you what Jerry Reynolds said. Get rid of the corner three. It's not good for the game. I think when the arc stops becoming an arc and turns into a straight line to go to the baseline, get rid of that. I think that would make the game a lot better. The game is not designed to come down on a 3-on-1 break, pass up a layup or a dunk to kick it out into the corner for a 3-point shot. It's not really that's not how the game of basketball really should be played. But the analytics now tells you that is the way the game should be played. And if you make more threes, you're going to win, and blah, blah, blah. I think that's bad for the game. I believe all of the things that you said, Larry, I think it's a culmination of them all. But you cannot tell me that Adam Silver privately is sitting in his offices in New York City when they have their board meetings and everything, and they say, gee, the game's great. No, they cannot say that. The game is not great. The ratings reflect that. The number of lopsided games that we had in the playoffs reflect that. They have to acknowledge that their game needs to be dealt with some subtle changes. I believe they need that.
No, I agree with you. I got one more for Grant. We'll pay the bills. We'll hit him with that coming up next on The Krug Show. Larry Krueger here for Telmetrics. Thanks to Casey Bateman and the good people at Telmetrics. If you're an occupational therapist, if you're an orthopedic surgeon, a chiropractor, a physical therapist of any kind, Telmetrics is designed for you to use in your practice and will greatly benefit your patients. Telmetrics uses computer vision and artificial intelligence and provides a platform for outpatient rehab therapy services, both in the clinical and the telehealth environments. So using Telmetrics can improve your patient's experience and much more. So for all your sports injury needs, or if you're a physical rehabilitation specialist of any kind, make sure you use telmetrics.co, TELMETRIX.co. And thanks to Casey Bateman and all the good people at Telmetrics for being a proud sponsor of the crew. I'd like to thank our sponsor, Dan Coach Emilio. Dan is a buddy, and he is a phenomenal retirement planning specialist. And you can contact him today at securemoney.com or at his number 925-628-9966. There's a lot of uncertainty in our world right now, and you want to make sure that your money is secure. That is the key. Danny's got 25 years of experience, born and raised right here in the Bay Area, and he can help you get an immediate 10% premium bonus on your principal retirement account. So give him a call, 925-628-9966. He'll make an appointment with you, and you can sit down. It's not a one-size-fits-all kind of a deal. He'll consult with you and come up with a strategy to get you going to where you want to be. Once again, 925-628-9966, securemoney.com on the web. And thanks to Dan Coach Emilio and all the people at Secure Money for being proud sponsors of The Krug Show. And thanks to Tony Cassera and the good people at Cassera's Italian Menswear. They are housing the Krug Show t-shirts, and they're a proud sponsor of the show as well. The Krug Show t-shirt, the Krug Show podcast t-shirt is available there at their store in Dublin. Their address is 7372 San Ramon Road in Dublin, California. And go see Tony Cassera and get yourself a Krug Show t-shirt and support the show. And special thanks to our sponsor, New York Style Italian Sausage. That's right, NewYorkStyleSausage.com is their website. Phenomenal product, whether it's the breakfast sausage, the Italian mild, the Italian spicy, the chorizo. You cannot go wrong with New York Style Italian Sausage. Once again, NewYorkStyleSausage.com, often imitated, never equaled. And they are a proud sponsor of the Krug Show. Thanks to them as well. All right, let's clean up the chat, and then we got one last one for Grant here. Ryan Hensley donates $4.99. Dunks are worth 3 points. Would that fix it? That's no. I don't think so. But that's an interesting one. A lot of people say too much flopping. This is from Gammon Brown, and donates $5. He says, Mr. Napear, I just wanted to say that you are the voice of my youth. Addict for Kings basketball. Your knowledge on the NBA is second to none. A lifetime fan.
Thank you.
Gammon Brown.
Thank you.
One of your fans, and one of many, Grant. You got a lot of fans in the chat, and lots of people here taking in the live stream. And we have got this one from 916_49er. More Krug and Napear shows, please. You guys, you guys are very kind, and Grant and I love rapping together. Let's finish with this. Tell us what you're doing. There's an awful lot of people that contact me throughout the week and really love these segments that we do.
Yeah.
We're going to take a couple weeks off just for summer break, but right when football starts in September, we're going to jump right back to a regular hit. But tell people, because you're doing a number of things, tell people where they can find you and where they can hear more of your takes on sports.
I'm on No Filter Network. I do a show twice a week with Sean Salisbury, Eric Burns, and Jeremy Roenick. You just go to nofilter.net. We're on at 9 a.m. Pacific on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I have a live show on an app called Listen App, Monday through Friday. I generally do it at 3 o'clock Pacific. Sometimes I have some travel issues, but I'm doing it every day, Monday through Friday. It's basically radio. It's on the internet. It's a live interactive show. I have my podcast to come out Tuesday and Friday. All my work can be found on ifyoudon'tlikethat.com. So I'm staying busy, Larry. I'm really enjoying what I'm doing, and I love doing this with you, man. This has been great. I'm also getting very positive feedback from the folks that follow me on my social media accounts, and you're huge in what you do in the Bay Area. So I'm really looking forward to doing this again in the football season, man. I think we're going to have a lot of fun. I really am excited about that.
Absolutely. So, hey, have a great rest of your summer. Have a happy 4th of July to you and your family, and we'll connect again sometime in during the NFL preseason and start talking about your G-men, my Niners, and get into the NFL stuff. And heck, before we even look up, it's going to be NBA opening night. You have to be amazed, by the way, at the length of the NBA season, and it's literally training camp in September. It's almost the 4th of July, and we're still very much talking basketball. We'll be talking summer league in the next few weeks.
And as crazy as that sounds, there's still hockey going on, right?
Yeah.
How crazy is that? How crazy is that?
It is amazing.
So sport. It's just 12. It's why you and I have our love for what we do, and why you're doing this, and why I do so many shows. I love talking sports, man. Right, and I love doing it. So, like you putting out shows. I mean, you said you were on for 3.5 hours last night, and then you were up doing the show 4.5 hours.
We did a 6-person live stream last night, where we had a bunch of experts, including Kevin Dana, the voice of the Santa Cruz Warriors. That's great. And we just broke down the draft, and it was just kind of free form. And like in the old days, we all would have seen all the players, but now it's like they're so it's so rare to actually know these players that you almost have to have that many people just to have somebody have an opinion on each guy. But we had a ton of fun last night, and I think the fans got into it. So, Grant, once again, love doing this stuff with you. Have a great couple of weeks. We'll catch you in a few, and thanks for stopping by the Krug Show.
Thanks, Larry. Appreciate you.
Never met a man I've been scared of. Careful, you won't get exactly what you asked for. Here for whatever you bring me, getting handled. I answer to no one, I don't need to have.